Corporate Finance OneNote Practice Problem. In this presentation, we're going to work a practice problem in OneNote related to estimated sales values. Get ready, it's time to take your chance with Corporate Finance. Here we are in OneNote. If you would like to follow along in OneNote, you're not required to do so, but if you have access to it and would like to, we are in the 611 Estimated Sales Values tab in the Practice Problems section. Closing this back out, we're going to have our information up top. We'll go through our calculations on down below. We're going to do an estimation process for estimated sales. Here's the giant calculator that we'll be using in our calculations. And this kind of estimation method is going to be a ratio-based estimation method. Whenever we're projecting out into the future, we're going to have to use some type of estimate, of course. And the use of ratios can really be helpful to know how we can apply some kind of ratio analysis, the probability type of analysis, such as this. So for example, we might be thinking about the sales layout and what we think the expected sales will be in the future. This may have an impact on one of the things that we'll talk about in this section of the course, which will be more on the financing, how we're going to finance, and whether we're going to finance using short-term financing and long-term financing and whatnot. But to do that, we need to consider what our sales will be. We need to consider possibly what our assets need to be in order to achieve those expected sales, and then how we're going to finance those, possibly with debt, with liabilities that we'll be talking about later. So to do that, we might project into the future, and we might have some scenarios. And one scenario might be, well, look, if the economy is really good, then we think that we might be earning $990,000. If the economy is not so, is like average, maybe, the 620. And if the economy goes down, or possibly our worst case scenario, we might say we expect something like 401,000. So if we have these three scenarios where we're trying to figure out possibly the upper limit, bottom limit, middle limit, then we can use those three numbers maybe then to figure out what the average would be, or some type of average that we can then use for our estimations. Now, one way we can do that obviously is to take the 990,000 plus the 620,000 plus the 401,000, and then divide by 3 in our three different scenarios, and we get 670,000. That would be equally weighting these three outcomes. We can say, well, if we equally weight these three outcomes, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, you're adding them up and divide by 3, same thing, then we can choose this number, and we can say, well, that looks like our average based on our three outcomes that are possible. The other way we can do that is we can try to say, well, how likely are these three options to say? I mean, if we think this upper option is likely if the economy does well, then the question in our mind is, well, how likely is it for the economy to do well? And we would have to apply like a percentage to it. So we can say, it's still just an estimate, but we can put more weight on some areas than the other. We might say, well, we think it's less likely than 1/3, possibly 30% likely that this upper limit will be achieved, that the economy will be big enough or well enough of an improvement for that to happen. Middle, we might say, hey, we don't think this is exactly even. We're going to say that's about 35, more likely to happen than the upper limit. And the lower limit, we're going to give a weight of 35 as well, more likely that there's a decline or a continuing bad economy, then the economy kind of jumps up. And so we can then take these numbers and try to work another type of estimate based on this weighted kind of average type of method. So that would look something like this. We can then say, well, the upper limit was at the 990,000. We think it's 30% likely to happen. 990,000 times 30% is going to give us the 297,000. The middle limit we think is that 620. We said that we approximate it to be 35% likely to happen. Therefore, we're going to get the 217,000. And the third option is going to be the lower of the 401. We think it's 35% likely. Therefore, if we multiply that out, the 401 times 35, we're going to get the 140,350. Then if we were to add up the outer column here, we would then get our expected level of sales at the 657,350, which is slightly different than you can see if we took, of course, the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, or the average, adding them up divided by 3 type of scenario. Now, note you can do this if you had more options, of course. Then if you had 4 options, you would just need to make sure that whatever you're applying out in terms of your ratios would be adding up to 100. And this might give you some more flexibility to brainstorm of the types of possibilities that could happen in the future, instead of just taking this range of scenarios and kind of picking one in the middle. So that can be a useful type of strategy. This kind of ratio percentage strategy is useful in many different types of measurement techniques in the past, and like if you're measuring performance in the past, or if you are kind of doing projections in the future and trying to figure out a numerical way to do that and be able to brainstorm different possible outcomes. Note that if you were to take the average, we took the average by adding these up and dividing by 3 to get that 670,333 on the average in the calculator here. If you took, of course, the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, and then added them up over here, that would be the same thing. So it'd be the same thing as if you just divided it out as if equally likelihood as if you took the average. If you added more types of scenarios, then again, as long as your weighted average here adds up to 100, then you can use this method. You're taking basically a weighted average. So then if we did this again, let's just do it one more time, and we're going to say, all right, what if the upper limit is 1,930? We're going to say the middle is going to be the 915, and the lower is the 605. And then we can say, okay, we're going to weight this out. This sales are going to be dependent on, say, the economy. We're going to say the upper limit we think is 30% likely to happen. The middle limit, we're going to say that's the most likely, so we'll give it the most weight. We're going to say, hey, the middle is where, typically we lie. If things are good, we've got this outlier that we think is possible. Possibly that has happened in the past, but that's not our norm. And the lower kind of bottom limit, possibly that's going to be worst case scenario. Maybe that's happened in the past. Maybe that's just what we expect could happen based on the worst case type of scenario. So then we might say, well, the upper limit, that's possible, but we think it's less likely. The middle, that's what our norm is, maybe. So maybe we give it more weight of the 50%, and the lower, maybe we give it a 20%. Again, we're kind of arbitrarily assigning these numbers because we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but we can use this method to arbitrarily assign them in a way that might be a little bit more systematically easy than just simply looking at these three numbers and try to pick the one in the middle, right? So if we then go down and if we apply this out, we would then say we want the upper is going to be the 1,930, and we think it's 30% likely. Therefore, if we multiply that out, 1,930 times the 30%, we get the 579. The middle, we have the 915. We think it's 50% likely. So if we multiply that out, the 915 times the 50%, we get the 458. And then the lower, the 605, we think it's 20% likely. The 605 times the 20% gives us the 121. Adding out the outer column, we then get to the 1,158, which you can see is not quite the middle number, right? But it's somewhere around that range. So you can use that method to do it. If we were to take a straight average, the 1,930 plus the 915 plus the 605, we get the 3,450. If we divide that by 3, that would be the straight average of the 1,150. It's pretty close in this case, coincidentally. And note that you can also, if you were to take the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, so if you were to take the percentage of 1 divided by 3, which is 0.33333, or 33.3333% on these three items, then of course you would come up to the same straight average type of number, taking the average of those three numbers. But you can then use this kind of weighted average type of method to give you a little bit more flexibility to make projections into the future.